Evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French and we'll be joined by our legal panel in just a few moments. But first, I want to begin with headlines making both local, national, and international news. We start in Paris, France, where authorities investigating a tragedy today. Let's go right now to Karen Travers joining us out of D.C.
Good evening. This French publication had been threatened in the past for its controversial cartoons, but its editorial team vowed to keep up its provocative work. Officials in France tell ABC News that the suspected gunmen are believed to be two brothers in their 30s and a teenager, and French authorities are now scrambling to find them.
Thousands of demonstrators gathered in Paris. A strong showing of solidarity after today's horrific terror attack at the offices of French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. The attack left at least a dozen dead, including 10 Charlie Hebdo staffers and 2 police officers. Witnesses said they could hear the gunmen shouting, "God is great," in Arabic. There's a massive manhunt now underway for the gunmen who fled in a getaway car.
Shoot your way into a building, target individuals, and leave. What would stop them from doing it in any other location, including the United States?
Charlie Hebdo has been threatened several times in recent years for its caricatures and controversial cartoons. In 2011, its offices were firebombed, an apparent retaliation for a cover featuring a spoof of the Prophet Muhammad. Reactions poured in from artists all over the world, showing their support for the French magazine and free speech.
At the White House today, President Obama called the attack cowardly and evil. Later today on Air Force One, he spoke to the French president and pledged the full support of the U.S. Reporting live from Washington, Karen Travers, ABC News. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And I want to bring in Dominic Carter right now, political journalist and author. We'll get into some other headlines, including national and also coming out of New York City. But on this one, beyond the immediate and obvious, there's also this fear of it can happen anywhere. Broad daylight, middle of Paris, and the casualness that these guys just got out, got back into a car, picked a shoe up off the sidewalk and didn't even speed away, just went right down, and all because of free press.
Well, first of all, Richard, it's a violation, a terrible violation of the First Amendment. We all know that. Tonight, 10 journalists are dead, 2 police officers. And the first thing that goes through your mind is, you know, you feel sorry for the people of France, but you worry and almost look over your shoulder that it could happen here. I'm sure that was your thought.
Well, it's that you wonder what the reaction's going to be. And yes, the world's smaller. You don't think it could happen here, but at the same end, we're talking about, look about the trial going on right now in Boston with Tsarnaev, right? And about he and his brother, and we're going to learn more facts about what was behind this, if it was coordinated, organized, or otherwise. But yet, it is about people that feel they have nothing to lose, and you marry that to religious extremism, at least from what we've seen from the initial facts that we've learned about this, and given the history of that satirical magazine and some of the threats they had, it is chilling. And
you don't know how organized it was, meaning whether or not a major group is behind terrorist group. We do know that all day it's been coming out of information out of France that it was a very professional type hit. So the obvious question, who's behind this? And it's my contention, Richard, when you think about it, newsrooms around the country, I know we want to believe that it couldn't happen here, but it's possible.
Especially when you're dealing with absolute lunacy. But again,
Good
downtown
point.
France.
Good point.
Middle of a Wednesday, in the middle of, like I said, a city that's probably got as many cameras as you'll find here, and they're still at large right now. All right, let's now turn to Capitol Hill. Republicans, they have assumed control of both the House and the Senate, and President Obama wasting no time in pushing back. President, he is poised to veto legislation over that controversial Keystone oil and gas pipeline, which stretches from Alberta, Canada, to the Gulf of Mexico. The White House also says the president, he'll veto legislation that would increase the Obamacare law's definition of a full-time worker. They want to change it from 30 to 40 hours per week. Republicans say the law's 30-hour requirement is encouraging companies to cut workers' hours. The White House said in a statement today that there is no evidence the law has caused a broad shift to part-time work, and the House plans to debate the measure this week as one of its first orders of business in the new Congress. And in the meantime, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he is blasting the veto threats from the White House. McConnell saying the president, he's obstructing the change that American voters want. And you can also expect an early battle when it comes to immigration. Remember what happened with that executive order? Well, the GOP using funding for the Department of Homeland Security kind of as a cudgel here, pushing back against those president's executive orders that limited deportations. It's also expected over the next 2 years, Republicans are going to try and pass several pieces of legislation that will either trigger more presidential vetoes or compromise, trying to engender that from the White House, really at the threat here of cutting funding to something else, or even the threat of going over the cliff. Before we get to the politics for a second, just when I heard McConnell say today, forgetting your politics, like, hey, you got to respect the will of the voter. He was the same guy, wasn't he, who said literally less than a week after the president got elected the first time that, you know what, 6 years ago, my first order of business is to try and get the guy unelected. It's amazing how, depending on how elections, how much they matter or they don't.
But Richard, that's a minor detail. That was then, and this is now. I just feel I'm laughing because I almost want to cry for the American constituent. Neither side appears to be backing down. So far, Obama's not backing down. A new powered Republican majority in Congress is not backing down. And it appears that they are on a straight collision course.
Well,
and
who do you think
blinks
first? And I ask that because I can make the compelling argument that Republicans are going to want to show some record of achievement in the next 2 years as they come up to 16, because obviously you got a presidential race and they want to be able to say, hey, listen, you put us in charge, we got some stuff done. On the flip side, no president wants to spend the last 2 years and the last chance at any relevancy when they're all in legacy building mode doing nothing. So you can argue, you know, he doesn't have a guy that he's handing it off to in terms of Biden or somebody else that he's looking out for. He's looking out for number one at this point in terms of what he wants. Who's more willing to cut deals that they're going to have trouble stomaching because they want something else?
I think it's literally going to go on a case-by-case basis, literally. I don't think we can generalize in terms of who's going to back down. But look at this. You raise a very good point, Richard. Mr. Obama does his immigration thing right before vacation and revitalized his administration. And, you know, we were all talking of him.
And by the way, the poll numbers seem to show that he's had an uptick really since the end of the year. Yeah.
So he was able to wipe away the lame duck. He ended the year on a rise, on an increase. But now, you know, I just don't know, because you're right, and I'm glad you made that point. 2016, the Republicans must show that they can get something done.
And you got a lot of guys who at least are entertaining the idea of running for president, if not announced, that are in the Senate right now or in the House that have these agendas. Okay, now let's go closer to home, Dom. And one of the two officers who was shot by a gunman in the Bronx released from the hospital today. Both of them, by the way, Rockland residents. Officer Aliro Pellerano, he is resting now at home after being released from St. Barnabas Hospital. Officer Andrew Dawsey, he remains hospitalized. His condition has not been released to this point. Police have arrested 24-year-old Jason Polanco and 28-year-old Joshua Kemp for the attacks. Authorities say they fired at the officers as they approached them regarding an armed robbery in which they were responding to. Now, Mayor de Blasio, he visited Officer Dawsey in the hospital on Tuesday. And Dawsey's father originally told the Daily News that his son didn't really want to see de Blasio there, and he was unimpressed by the mayor's sympathy. Now, this comes as Mayor de Blasio has faced stiff criticism from the NYPD. Officers, as we all know, turning their backs not just at the Ramos funeral, but even after warnings from police brass at the Lou funeral as well. Both those officers, of course, gunned down in an ambush in Brooklyn. Now, the mayor and the police commissioner condemned the actions of the cops after the most recent incident.
They were disrespectful to the families involved. That's the bottom line. They were disrespectful to the families who had lost their loved one. And I can't understand why anyone would do such a thing in a context like that. I also think they were disrespectful to the people of this city, who in fact honor the work of the NYPD.
I just don't understand it. I'm sorry that I just do not understand that. What was the need in the middle of that ceremony to engage in a political action? The selfishness of that action. The selfishness of it. A funeral is not a place for that. Come demonstrate outside City Hall, come demonstrate outside police headquarters, but don't put on your uniform and go to a funeral and engage in a political action.
Now, new reports also show the police may also be turning their backs to certain crimes. Numbers show that lately police have been making far fewer arrests, and the Times reporting that a city of more than 8 million people and 33 million subway riders a week, just as one example, police officers arrested or ticketed 22 people for jumping turnstiles last week. Now, give you a frame of reference, a year ago for that same week, 1,400 fare beaters, I should say, were caught. And for 2 consecutive weeks, New York City police officers have seemed to sit back, ignoring minor offenses and parking transgressions so completely that only 347 criminal summonses were written in the 7 days through Sunday. And again, as from a reference, that's down from more than 4,000 in the same period a year ago. And when asked if there was an arrest slowdown, PBA President Pat Lynch said this to NPR.
Absolutely not. What you have now is police officers being assassinated, so we had to redouble our efforts to make sure that police officers are safe so that we can keep the public safe. That means we have to double up on jobs.
Lynch also spoke out to NPR about the mayor.
City Hall is creating a climate where every interaction with police officers turn into a confrontation. When he attacks the New York City Police Department, he's attacking his own department and his own policies. If the policy is wrong, then change it.
Interesting, depending on your perspective. Well, today, for the second time this week, the police commissioner, he sat down with the police unions to talk about the current tension between the cops and City Hall. Dominic, let's assume for conversation, knock on wood, there's not another tragedy. There's not another shooting here where police are involved, okay? You've seen enough of these over 30 years. For people who pretend that we've never had tension between City Hall and cops and there hasn't been other divisions, they should remember the 70s and 80s, okay? This is not novel. This hasn't been going on for a while. There's been debates and some tough times, even under Rudy and stuff, but not like this, I grant you. How do you see this thing playing out? You know the principals, you know Lynch, you know Bratton. I noticed the mayor wasn't in this meeting. At some point, you would think the commissioner is going to say, all right, listen, you want to make your points, you make your points. But you guys, rank and file, don't determine here when we're going to have complete slowdowns. And moreover here, if your commanders can't get you guys in line, you're not going to do it. I can find someone else who's going to do this. You got to figure we're approaching that point. Or does he fear about the backlash from the police, if in fact there's any crackdown from Police Plaza or City Hall?
What I found interesting, Richard, at the funeral of former Governor Mario Cuomo yesterday, the mayor literally walked right past me. Now, this is somebody I've known for 25 years, covered him when he was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, even before he was a city councilman. And I yelled, Mr. Mayor, and he did a presidential move on me. He acted like he completely didn't hear me, and there was no way in the world that he could miss me trying to yell out at him. But I think he did not want to be pigeonholed and caught by reporters to show you how damaging this is, because he doesn't want to talk off the cuff. The stakes are high for Mr. de Blasio. His mayoralty, in my opinion, is on the line. We have been down this road before, but I've never seen it this bad.
But I get the subtle impression, and it's different than it was a week ago and certainly than 2 weeks ago. But I get the impression that the public's going to say, listen, I got your point, NYPD, okay? There's some of the stuff that this mayor said that you weren't crazy about. But wait a minute. You guys can't just decide when you just feel like choosing to enforce the law and when you don't.
It's almost like the army is running.
Right. I get that subtle impression that they said, you made your point, but get back to work a little bit. Now, I don't want we got a lot of police who watch our show, and I'm not suggesting that people aren't doing their job, but the numbers are the numbers, okay? And you can't have, basically rank and file making up their own rules. There's leadership. We have civilian leadership in the military and the police for a reason, okay? At the end of the day. So my point to you is, who's overplaying their hand right now?
The union is overplaying their hand. but the mayor must extend some. I'm not saying he has to apologize, but he must extend some type of olive branch.
And you don't think he's done it so far?
It seems like all he's done is infuriate the unions even more. He's got to keep Reverend Sharpton out of the mix. He must stay out, because that's what this is really about. It starts with that summit at City Hall where Reverend Sharpton was there.
Side by side.
That's where all of this started about, and that's what happened this weekend where Rudy Giuliani on national television was talking about Sharpton. So it started with that premise.
And talking about Dante at every
turn. And talking about the mayor's son, yes.
Yep.
So,
Dominic, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this sooner than later. All right, when we come back, we're going to head out to Ferguson, Missouri. Not so much about the trial itself of the aftermath, but about what happened behind closed doors. A grand juror in that Michael Brown case wants to speak out about the case, but a gag order in place. Now that juror is suing, how much should the public actually know about such cases? Our legal panel weighs in. That's when we return. This coming out of Paris, where authorities investigating, of course, that deadly terror attack by Islamic extremists at the French newspaper. We'll be right back.